You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Jason Moore. He's the founder of Spren, S-P-R-E-N. We're going to talk about digital biomarkers. So Jason spent the past 10 years turning smartphones into powerful tools for tracking body composition with like DEXA scan level accuracy and other things like that. His work has impacted well over 1 million users, including gold medal winning Olympians. And he recently raised 11 million plus to scale this technology. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what it's about. So welcome to the podcast, Jason. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to share, try to be helpful to anyone listening to see if we can learn something today.
Yeah, good. So what's the idea behind Spren? What's the point of it?
I mean, basically, there's a whole long backstory, but the short version of it, and we can get into the long version if you want, but the short version is health and fitness and wellness and now longevity, all these labels that we have for this journey that we go on. Every person in the whole world has a journey that falls under one of those labels, and it's hard. It's a hard, complicated, nuanced thing. And life is busy, and money is always more and more scarce and competitive, and time and attention and all these things are working against us. So that was the same for me as it was for anybody else listening to this. And I originally was looking for ways to track things about my body for a number of reasons, to solve my own health issues and to help my clients that I was working with at the time as a trainer and coach and my friends and family figure out what actually is going to work for me and my body to get healthier, to get fitter, to get more energy, less pain, and better longevity, whatever the label is. Try to figure out how to get feedback and insights from the body. And maybe this is the medium length version, not the short version. Sorry about that. But in any case, that led me to research on heart rate variability and then eventually body composition. And these two areas seem to be areas that we could innovate and make high quality data and insights more available to more people. They're very important markers of overall health and well-being and longevity and performance, if you prefer those labels. And
let's go over these two for people that don't know. So heart rate variability, why is it important? What does the average person have in terms of it? And what's a good or a bad HRV?
Yeah, it's a great question. So heart rate variability is essentially looking at every time your heart beats, let's just say for easy math, that your heart is beating at 60 beats per minute, just for easy math. A lot of people think that that's 1 beat per second, like a metronome. But in reality, there's a different amount of time between each and every beat. And so it's more like 0.95 seconds or 1.01 seconds between each heartbeat. That is this phenomenon called heart rate variability. And people might be like, why should I care about that? Basically, it's because there are different systems of the body, the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system. All these systems really connect to your heart and influence this variability. And certain patterns in that variability help us understand what's happening across the whole body. So if your nervous system is in a fight or flight mode, where typically your heart rate will be a little bit higher, your blood pressure will be a little bit higher, your digestion will be a little bit worse, your sexual function will be a little bit worse, your recovery from exercise or stress will be a little bit worse when you're in this fight or flight mode. Your heart rate variability goes down when that happens. When you're in a more rest and digest mode, where the opposite of everything I just said, basically better digestion, better sexual function, better recovery, better muscle repair, better clarity of mind, and all of this other stuff. This is kind of more of the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. You have typically higher heart rate variability when that's happening. So it's kind of
Sounds like that's because you're operating now in the normal range of where you should be. So the body allows for this natural variability, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a little counterintuitive because a lot of people are like, they kind of think about arrhythmias and, ectopic heartbeats and things and saying like, oh, don't I want a consistent heartbeat? And those are two different things. They do have some relationship when you go really deep, but it's a little different than like an arrhythmia. We're looking at exactly what you just said, which is that when your body is not in a fight or flight mode, it's a little bit more flexible and resilient, and it can kind of ebb and flow. As you inhale, for example, your heart rate goes up, and as you exhale, your heart rate goes down. When you're in a fight or flight mode, that doesn't typically happen as much. And so it's a good thing to have a higher heart rate variability, generally speaking.
And this reminds me of is like, if you get handmade clothes or handmade anything, woodcraft, there's going to be imperfections and variability, but you know that it was made by a person and, they put their heart into it. So I guess, again, because we're a natural creature, we're going to have that variability too. We won't be like a machine and have the exact same, heart rate, pacing and all that stuff. It's to be a living thing is to have this natural variability in everything you are.
Yeah, definitely. And another analogy is like trees, for example, are, when the wind blows against a really tall tree, it's important that that tree is able to bend a little bit. If it was perfectly rigid, it would just break. And being able to bend and then bend back creates greater resiliency in that tree. Tall buildings are the same way. That's how we learn from an architecture standpoint how to architect really tall buildings. They're not rigid, they're actually flexible, and they have greater resiliency because of that flexibility. That's just kind of an analogy way to think about it. But the body is much more nuanced actually than both of those things. And so the HRV number can actually give us insight into things like how well recovered are we from exercise or from stress, or if we're doing guided breathing or meditation, is that actually stabilizing our nervous system or not? You can use it as a biofeedback tool. So it's a pretty cool marker. I think it's getting more and more attention now that it's built into more wearables and things. But what we do is we also provide it if you don't have a wearable. You can use the camera of your phone to measure heart rate variability using Spren.
Well, how does that work?
Yeah, so basically the way that it works in the app today is you touch your finger to the back of your phone on the camera, and it's very similar to a wearable, but light shines through your finger. And you can actually do this if you're listening right now. You can just literally open the camera app on your phone and then cover up the camera with your fingertip. And you'll notice that if you cover up the camera, your whole phone turns red, like the screen turns red. And the light shining through your finger is actually showing, if you look really, really closely, sometimes you can see it with your own eyes. You can see your heart beating in the camera. And that's the same technology that we've used, but we've amplified it, made it a lot more accurate so that you can actually extract the heart rate variability data from that. And it's pretty cool because you can do that anytime, anywhere with your phone.
So what's a healthy heart rate variability? How much a half a beat a second, a quarter?
Well, it's a good question. This is it's a deep rabbit hole. There's a whole bunch of metrics that fall under this umbrella term of heart rate variability, but the most common one is this statistic called RMSSD, which, if you want to get really nerdy, is the root mean square of successive differences in your heartbeat. And for young people, the normal range is kind of in the 60s to 80s for young individuals. For people in the like 30s to 50s range, that number typically is like between 30 and 50. And then for people who are like 60 plus, it will be in the like 25 to 35 range for that number. And it may not really be intuitive. What does that even mean? Like 25 or 55, right?
Well, the variability goes down maybe because the arteries are less elastic as you get older, I guess, from atherosclerotic deposition, and maybe that doesn't allow the heart rate to change more than it would before.
That's exactly right. That's one contributing factor. That's the cool thing about HRV is people actually in the research community say that if there was one marker that was non-invasive that represented the, biological age, which is something that's kind of a trendy topic right now, heart rate variability is a contender to be the one metric, because your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, all these systems work in concert. And as you age, your HRV goes down as those systems become less flexible, more rigid. And you can counteract that through lifestyle, through medical interventions, through other means, and essentially kind of, stay young, so to speak, stay flexible. But yeah, we've kind of translated that in our app into a scoring system that makes it hopefully a little bit more intuitive. That's kind of more like a 1 to 100 score, where, higher is generally better. And you can do things like improve your fitness levels, do breath work, reduce inflammation in the body through a number of means. All of those things should contribute to better heart rate variability and correlate with better health and better well-being.
Okay, so Spren measures this using the camera and the phone.
Yep.
How many times a day are people encouraged to get readings?
Most people will do it once a day, first thing in the morning when they wake up. And it's a 60-second scan, so it doesn't really take that long. And you can miss days. It's not a big deal. The algorithm basically will learn what your normal HRV patterns are pretty quickly after you do it a few times. And from there, with that baseline, it will kind of adapt with you and say like, hey, you're trending positively or you're trending negatively. And people find that that's really valuable for doing things like seeing, okay, if I go to bed 30 minutes earlier, how does that affect my heart rate variability overall? Or if I avoid drinking alcohol, either as much or late into the night or something like that, how does that impact my HRV? Or if I go for a walk after my meals, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these experiments that you can do, and just doing that 60-second snapshot in the morning of your HRV can be a really consistent way to gauge if you're moving in a positive or negative direction.
How much can it move with breath work and dietary interventions and all that exercise?
So this is the other interesting thing about HRV is in any given moment, HRV can be quite variable, which is funny because it's in the name, obviously. But there's this thing called an orthostatic test where if you're sitting down or lying down and then you stand up, this is how some medical practices will test nervous system health. Your heart rate variability will plummet when you stand up and your heart rate will go up. But if you have a healthy nervous system, it should actually return to baseline quickly. Your heart rate should come back down quickly and your HRV should come up, probably not to where it was when you were sitting or lying down, but it should come back up close to that. And the reason why I bring the example up is because that just indicates on an acute basis how much it can change. And when you do breath work, that's one of the aha moments that people have. Breath work is one of these things that some people are really into it. Other people are very skeptical of it, call it kind of woo-woo, etc. When you use HRV as a biofeedback mechanism, it really cuts through all the noise, and you can literally see your nervous system changing in real time with like 3 breaths. And
what's the one quick thing you said? You breathe in, the heart speeds up. When you breathe out, it slows down. So I was thinking of like box breathing and things like that. But what about when you just are holding your breath for a few seconds? If you're doing box breathing, what does it do then?
Yeah, so it depends a little on the individual, but the normal behavior is that the breath hold, as long as it's not for a long period of time, like if it's just for a few seconds, the breath hold kind of basically maintains your heart rate where it's at. So if you inhale, you'll see your heart rate increase a few beats. Hold, it'll kind of stay there. Then exhale, you'll see the heart rate come down. Hold, it'll stay there. And then repeat, obviously. But if you end up holding your breath, this is highly individual. So some people need to ease into that because their nervous system needs more practice before it's ready to do those holds. And so people can kind of use HRV again as a biofeedback tool to see what the ideal window is for those holds or for the length of the inhale and the exhale. And if you hold it too long or you try to slow your exhale or your breathing rate down too slow too quickly, the nervous system it backfires. It actually activates some emergency systems in the nervous system and can backfire on that whole technique. That's why I think it's really beneficial to start out slow and use HRV as a biofeedback tool for that. We've got experts and practitioners Dr. Leah Lagos, shout out to her, for example. She is a clinical psychologist that works with some really notable people on nervous system regulation and breath work and uses HRV in her practice. And she's got protocols for how to accommodate or how to get used to slowing down your breathing and centering yourself around, the practice of breath work. But to kind of answer the other half of your question, even though I don't know if it was necessarily, basically expanding upon that, is you also can see a sustained change in your HRV from these practices. And that shows up when you do those morning check-ins or morning readiness scans, sometimes we call them. That's where the baseline can change. And if you're somebody who needs nervous system regulation and breath work is an intervention that works well for you, you'll actually see the ripple effect of that in your baseline. A lot of people may need other things in their lives to change as well. Like, for example, managing their overall stress load or altering their diet or their exercise routines, etc., to change that baseline HRV.
So based on your age, and I don't know whatever factors, but what range do you want your HRV to get into?
For a lot of people, I think, a good goal is 50 plus for a lot of people. Now, people listening to this who measure their HRV, especially if they have a wearable where it's tracking kind of at random times throughout the night or something like that, those are really great devices. Actually, you can get HRV through like an Oura Ring or a Whoop or an Ultra Human Ring, for example. It's a little bit of a different way of measuring because it's measuring a lot of times during the night, during deep sleep, and that creates a slightly different range. But you really want that HRV to be north of 30, above 30 for sure, is a great goal for a lot of people. If you're really kind of more into the optimizing stage, but you're not super young, let's say, then aiming for like the 40s, 50s is a good goal. But if you're either an athlete or relatively young, aiming for 50s, 60s and up is a good goal as well. And there are people, especially if they're highly conditioned, either endurance athletes or et cetera, who can go pretty far above that, actually. But that's a good range for people to shoot for.
Will they notice other things once they get their HRV up? Like what company is it, if anything?
Yeah, so a lot. This is this is one of the pros and cons of HRV, is it actually is a very holistic metric, which is great as like a gauge of whether or not your efforts are improving the overall system. The cons to that is sometimes it's hard to specifically point at what is the main contributor to a change in your HRV, and it can take a little bit of experimentation. So I think that's somewhat related to your question in the sense that if you do something like breath work and that improves your HRV, sometimes that will also then manifest in you experiencing better digestion and greater comfort in digestion, for example, or more energy throughout the workday. Other times it won't, and it takes a little bit of individual experimentation to see where you're going to land on that. But most of the time, the activities that you need to do to increase your HRV are going to align with feeling a greater sense of recovery or rest, better sleep, better energy, less inflammation in the body, less stress. These are common things that are reported with doing behaviors that increase your HRV.
Well, yeah, and so if I have an HRV of 30, let's say I'm 50 years old, I have an HRV of 30, so do breath work and other stuff, and I get it up to like 50 after, I don't know, a month or two. So what will I feel? I mean, like what if people reported just calmer, more energy at work or more energy during the day, or like, what else have they reported to you?
Yep. All of the above of those things. Yeah. I mean, some people have literally had, psychological transformations in the sense of they may have been either clinically or subclinically, depressed or something like that. And through the process of improving their HRV have completely reversed that and eliminated it. Now, the problem here is I just want to be careful in communicating that there's probably a high degree of correlation, not causation here. Now, like if you have depression and you increase your HRV through some means, it doesn't guarantee that it will, alleviate the depression, but there's a very high correlation in doing so, and it provides a nice North Star metric that's very easy to measure to gauge. A lot of people have had another way to look at that is let's talk about like fatigue, for example. Fatigue is something that at periods of time almost everyone has experienced, and some people get chronic fatigue, whether you're talking about the like clinical kind of version of that or more of like a subjective self-reported version of that, all of which are valid in different ways. Let's say you perceive yourself to have some sort of chronic fatigue. A lot of times people will try everything. They'll try going to bed earlier. They'll try drinking less soda or calories or caffeine. They'll try eliminating alcohol. They'll try changing their diet. They'll try exercising, all these different things. And noticing that their HRV is below average for their age range. And when they finally find the mix of behaviors that unlocks their HRV and brings it back into the normal range, that is when they experience relief from that chronic fatigue. So that's not exactly scientific validation in and of itself, the way I've just told that story. There is a lot of compelling evidence now in the scientific community about kind of the correlations and mechanisms there. But those types of anecdotes are, we've had thousands of those at this point sent to us.
Well, what else does your app measure? You talked about heart rate variability. I guess heart rates. I don't know if it measures blood pressure or you said body composition. You didn't get into, but before that, anything else it measures?
Yeah, body composition's a hot one. With HRV comes heart rate and respiration rate. So if you're interested in your resting heart rate and your respiration at rest as well, normal adult, their respiration rate tends to be between 12 and 18 breaths per minute when you're at rest. And generally speaking, when you're at rest, it's better to be on the lower end of that, like you're breathing slower, so to speak. There's not like a lot of red flags to point at if you're within the normal range and you were in the 12 to 18. If you're above 18 breaths per minute, on a normal at-rest scenario, there might be some things to look into there just for overall longevity and well-being.
Well, what if you have sleep apnea? Can I pick that up?
So kind of, yes. I mean, we don't currently have anything for directly measuring sleep apnea in our product, but sleep apnea for sure impacts HRV. In fact, again, thinking about that baseline of HRV, if you have sleep apnea and you're able to resolve it or alleviate it, people often see a huge increase in their morning baseline of HRV. And, it kind of makes sense. I mean, your sleep is a huge contributing factor to basically everything. But your HRV is very sensitive to sleep. Having, clear breathing and normal regulated breathing throughout the night is much more restorative to the body than not. And so it makes sense that there's a high correlation there. We don't directly measure sleep apnea today, but there are wearables and things that you can use to do that and apps as well. But
only new body composition then, since you mentioned that.
Yeah. So body composition is really hot for us right now. HRV, as we've just talked about, is a really cool metric, but body composition is one that everyone can see in the mirror as well, right? So it's highly visible and highly relevant to overall health and well-being. And it's something that the world is kind of changing a little bit right now. The U.S. government, for example, is evaluating changing the definition of obesity. Historically, it has been based on your weight, which BMI, this is something interesting for the listeners too, is that a lot of people think BMI is body composition, but in reality, it's more accurate to kind of call it your weight. BMI is basically like weight compared to height. And so if you're really tall, obviously you're going to be heavier, but relative to your height, what is your weight? That tells you a little bit about your health. The problem with it is two things. One is if you're relatively fit and you carry muscle, muscle weighs more than fat, it's more dense than fat, and that can drive your weight up on the scale, and that's not bad. Muscle is almost universally better to have more of for all outcomes. There's obviously a limit to that if you're in like competitive bodybuilding or something from a health perspective. But in any case, the other problem with it is that it becomes the wrong metric to calibrate in game. So people who are quote unquote overweight or carry too much fat or adipose tissue, if we want to be kind of scientific about it, on their bodies, one way to lose weight is actually to lose muscle. And if you eat less and are not getting enough protein or not getting enough strength training or something like that, you actually end up losing a fair amount of muscle, which is catastrophic for metabolism and for a bunch of other health outcomes. But the scale weight may go down when that happens. And under the old definition, a lot of people would think that that's good. Now, this kind of is a full circle to your question about body composition. The reason why we got so excited about body composition and being able to make that measurable just from the camera of your phone is that now anyone can just use their phone with our app to measure more than just your weight. You can measure your body fat percentage, your lean muscle mass to see how much fat and muscle distributed around your body you have. And there's some social and psychological pressure around those metrics that kind of we want to be careful with and to say, look, our goal is to help you understand what reality looks like. There's no shame in anyone's starting point, but being able to measure these things on a weekly basis instead of going to the doctor once a year and getting it measured there once a year allows you to make better decisions and to know if the things that you're doing are moving you in the right direction or the wrong direction. And everybody has ups and downs, but getting that feedback allows you to kind of calibrate and over time, hopefully move in the right direction. So body composition shows you all that plus your metabolic rate and helps you understand more muscle is good, generally speaking. Less fat is good, generally speaking, but also where that is on your body matters. So we're learning as a community that your actual body fat percentage doesn't matter that much unless it's extremely high or extremely low. If it's anywhere kind of in the 1 to 2 standard deviations of the norm, it's, that's not the metric really to pay attention to. The metric is your lean mass and your distribution of fat. You don't want fat around the midsection. We call it Android fat in our app because that's what the scientific community calls it off of deficit of iPhone fat. Right, yeah, exactly. That's a funny joke because every time we submit an update to the App Store, this is a little insider business info here, is every time we submit an update to the App Store, Apple flags the fact that we talk about Android in our app, and they're like, you're not supposed to talk about Android. And we're like, this is not that. I mean, this is the Android region of your body. So, but yeah, that's part of life.
Using an iPhone maybe for ad leaf. So, all right. So right now people can, what is it? What's the form factor? Is it a ring with an app tied to it? Or, how does your device work? Spren.
So actually we don't have any devices. Everything just uses your phone. And so all you need is your phone and the Spren app, which is, like you said at the beginning, Spren. And you can download that app and there's a free trial so you can try everything out for free. It's got a bunch of stuff in there like food logging, nutrition planning, habit coaching, etc. But, obviously it starts with these measurement tools where you can estimate body composition and heart rate variability, heart rate, respiration, and you can link up your wearables too to understand how your activity data, your sleep, your exercise all contributes to changes in those data points over time.
Okay. Well, pretty good. So people can go download it. They go to Android or iPhone, they put in Spren, Spren, and then they're good to download it and start using it, right? With a free trial.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, without having any equipment and just having an app, seems like a no-brainer. It's that cheap. That's to at least get started and run the thing. I don't see why anyone wouldn't do it.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, basically, there's a lot of noise out there in the world and a lot of, especially in the health, wellness, in this entire space, but I think this is one of our goals is to say like, look, we don't want there to be a barrier for you to understand what the current state of your body is. And then that helps you cut through all the rest of the noise. So there you go. Like you said, there's a free trial. There's no cost to it. You go get your baseline starting. And then from there, you can decide if you like our tools, and we have different things that you can buy, etc. But, we're really trying to break down the barriers of access to this data because, at the end of the day, it kind of comes full circle to your first question is people, again, the journey is tough, but getting that insights from your own body can really make it easier for you to know if your time and your money and your effort are going to good use. And that was just, that's what motivates us.
Well, very good, Jason. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and describing all this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.